Hi, I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have our playoff divisional round recap, which consisted of 4 games, which means 4 more teams go home and lose their Super Bowl aspirations, but it also means 4 more teams are one step closer to winning that big game. So we will jump right into it, starting with the Saturday games, which both featured a 1 seed from each respective division, and starting with the AFC side of that, with the Jacksonville Jaguars heading to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs, and the Chiefs securing a home win and a place in the championship game by the score of 27-20.
Yeah, this was a good game by both teams. The Jaguars had a chance to capitalize early when Patrick Mahomes went down with a high ankle sprain, and they ended up having Chad Henne be the backup quarterback coming in and led him on a 98-yard TD drive where the Jaguars really could have capitalized. But even in the end, the Jags had a chance to tie it late, but a bad interception by Trevor Lawrence led to the Jaguars' defeat and the first loss by Trevor Lawrence on a Saturday in, I believe, 35 games.
Oh man,
going back to college.
That's a hell of a track record. Impressive by the Chiefs to end that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this game, the Chiefs played a really good game, don't get me wrong. But I think that the Jacksonville Jaguars didn't play bad, but just missed a huge opportunity with that Mahomes injury. The Chiefs used to have such an all-star roster that even without Mahomes, rather, they would still be able to put up a good fight. But, you start to lose players. They lost a couple guys on that defense, a big one on the offensive side being Tyreek Hill, to the point where that team is much more relying on Patrick Mahomes than they were last year. And the Jaguars had a chance to get the big win and the huge upset when Mahomes had that injury, and especially when Henne came in. But as Cal mentioned, they automatically let Henne lead a 98-yard touchdown drive on them, which is just so disheartening. But overall, it was an amazing game to watch. I sadly didn't get to catch all of it, but all that I did get to see of it, I thoroughly enjoyed. So good effort by the Jaguars. But nevertheless, congratulations to the Chiefs. Next up, we got the NFC side with the 1 seed, with the 6 seed New York Giants heading to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles, and the Eagles handily picking up their spot in the NFC Championship game by the score of 38-7.
Yeah, this was a dominant game by the Eagles from start to finish. They started out and jumped out to a 21-0 or 28-0 lead early before halftime, and then they actually had a playoff record 265 rushing yards total throughout the game, which is obviously when you have that, you're gonna win. The Giants tried to put up a fight late, but it was just too late for the Giants to overcome.
Yeah, 200, I think 76. We'll pop it up right here. I can't remember for sure.
It was something like that. It was a high 200.
But when you have that many rushing yards, that shows that you have the passing yards stacked on top of that. That's just so many yards of offense. And more importantly, that shows an unbelievable time of possession. We'll have to pop that up on the screen as well, but I cannot even imagine how much time they had the ball on offense there, and we're just eating away at the clock with the lead. As a Vikings fan, it's annoying to see the Giants go there and get smoked, and I'm not going to say the Giants played awful. They didn't play great by any means. They played nowhere near the level they played against Minnesota the week before.
That's true.
But they did not play well, and the Eagles were just able to stomp them. I can't believe they didn't step up more and kind of show up for a huge game like that, especially against a divisional opponent. It's always so crazy. You get that motivation and that hype from playing a divisional opponent. Usually you don't see teams come out flat in divisional games, and that is exactly what the Giants did. And as Callan mentioned, they played better in the second half than the first half. But when you go into halftime down 28-0, just playing better isn't really going to do much. You have to play unbelievable, and they were not able to do that. Hence, they weren't able to pick up the win.
That's how it goes.
Next, moving on to the Sunday games, starting with the AFC yet again in a 3 versus 2 seed matchup with the Cincinnati Bengals heading to Buffalo to take on the Bills. And the Bengals, the road team this time, handily taking care of their opponent the Bengals pick up a road win by the score of 27-10.
Yeah, this was the Damar Hamlin game. That was a rematch from just a few weeks ago when the Damar Hamlin situation happened and they had to cancel the game. And I picked the Bengals because they were up early in that game and they continued that momentum early into this game and went up to 14-0 early in the game, and it was just not enough for Buffalo to overcome. Buffalo picked a bad time to have their worst game, and that's just what happened. Josh Allen had a couple of bad interceptions. They couldn't get anything going on the ground. Cincinnati could. They had a great running game, had a solid passing game, and it was just too much for the Bills to overcome.
It really was. Where that came down to why the Bills lost this game in my eyes is on Buffalo's defensive side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
All season, Buffalo's defense has been thriving because they have this sort of man coverage match where they read and react. They read a quarterback's eyes, they react to what a receiver is doing, and then they play two high safeties with Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, two high-level safeties in the NFL these days. But they have just gone through so many injuries in their secondary. Of course, Damar Hamlin, Micah Hyde has been out for a while and was out for the season. Something Marlowe, I can't remember his first name.
Dean Marlowe.
Dean Marlowe got injured during that game and missed almost the entirety of that game. And what it did is it made it so that the corners were still healthy for the Bills and could still play that read and react. But these safeties were really struggling to be that safety blanket. And it used to be when the corners made a mistake, they had good enough safeties behind them that they could make up for it. But the Bengals were totally able to exploit that lack of depth in the secondary for the Bills and the amount of injuries in the secondary for the Bills, and jumped out to a 14-point lead very, very quickly with 2 Joe Burrow touchdowns. And the Bengals just really didn't slow down from there. In the second half, they established the run game. And there was just no stopping them. There really wasn't.
And one key battle that was won by the Bengals was the trenches. That Bengals offensive line, who had 3 new starters on it, was able to dominate that Bills defensive line and keep Joe Burrow upright for most of the game.
Big time.
Mm-hmm.
And then now what I consider to be game of the week, I really enjoyed this game as well as the Chiefs and Jags one. But the NFC Sunday matchup was the 5-seed Dallas Cowboys heading to San Francisco to take on the 2-seed Niners. And the Niners pick up a win by a score of 19-12.
Yeah, this was a dominant game by the Niners defense again. And this was just becoming a broken record kind of deal where the Niners defense continues to shut out teams in the second half. Dak Prescott had one of his worst games. And just like I said with the Bills, he picked a bad time to have one of his worst games. And he had a couple of bad interceptions also. The 49ers, just that defense was too much for him to overcome. George Kittle had a great game, including an almost damn near immaculate reception off his own face mask. You have to look that one up.
That was a fun one.
But it was just too much for the Cowboys to overcome, to have too many of their own mistakes, including an end-of-the-game play where it was reminiscent of the Colts-Patriots fake punt from, I believe it was 2017, where they hiked it under center, where they were obviously overmatched, and I don't know what they were trying to do, but I'm sure it worked in practice.
Yeah, to describe how much of a cluster the play was for the Cowboys, Ezekiel Elliott was playing center and got pancaked by the one person rushing. So
immediately.
It just did. I don't know. Actually, I have an idea what they were going for with kind of a hook and ladder type setup to Ezekiel Elliott. But let's just say it far from worked. It wasn't even close. And also, those couple of interceptions Dak Prescott had were so much more than bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's nearly undescribable how awful those interceptions were by Dak. When you have that much pressure on you, and he was getting pressure on him, so I mean this in the way of atmospheric pressure from the surrounding and the stage set by him, and the literal pressure of 49ers defensive linemen in his face. But you have to keep some sort of composure when you're going to be this Super Bowl team that a lot of people thought the Cowboys might have been. But he did not have that composure at all.
No.
Both of his interceptions are awful, and he didn't really do a ton of great stuff outside of those interceptions to make up for them. Hence why the Niners were able to outlast him in the long run. One thing I found interesting, though, is we talked a lot about Purdy getting some of that pressure on him from the Dallas defense. And I think that he felt it. You could tell that Brock Purdy
didn't have his best game.
It's not like to say that he had an awful game. In fact, I don't even know if he had an interception. But you could tell that that pressure was getting to him, and he was just not the cool and collective quarterback that he usually was. Again, luckily, guys like George Kittle and Deebo Samuel, and especially Christian McCaffrey, was able to bail him out on multiple occasions, which is awesome to have. If you can keep any sort of composure and you have that elite of an offense around you, you're golden, especially for a rookie like Brock Purdy. But we'll see how he does against the Philadelphia Eagles defense, who's just as good, if not even better. And I don't think Jalen Hurts will have as much of a struggle bus as Dak Prescott did.
No, it'll come down to whether or not Jalen Hurts and the Eagles have their worst game. They kind of haven't had a really bad game since that Washington game a few weeks back, but we'll have to see how it goes. I thought that Purdy played pretty well, even given the circumstances, especially for the stage. He didn't play perfect, but not as well as he had in the last few games. But I thought one key difference maker was Elijah Mitchell was able to establish the running game this week.
Certainly.
And that was a huge difference maker when you also have the stars that you named on top of it, and then you got a young guy like Elijah Mitchell coming in and kind of making an impact. That just adds more fuel to that fire of that offense, and that just helps out Purdy even more.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to affect him in the long run, as in the NFC Championship game. But at one point during that game, Christian McCaffrey was having some hamstring trouble, which caused Elijah Mitchell to come in and play a much larger role than he was supposed to. But Mitchell took that opportunity and quite literally ran with it, because that 49ers offense didn't slow down at all going from McCaffrey to Mitchell. So that was our NFL divisional round recap. Keep an eye out tomorrow for our championship game predictions. But until then, don't forget
to eat the W.